Hello everyone and welcome again to this Python course. Okay, so we've done our first batch of exercises and quizzes. We already know how to work with Python as a calculator, and we've also seen the atomic data types, the most basic data types that we can work around in the programming language. Now in this section we'll look mostly at three really important concepts which are conversions, variables and also comparisons. These components of the language are really important and will let you get a bit more flexible here in Python because, of course, we are not only going to use Python as a calculator, otherwise we would use a calculator, so we are going to do more advanced stuff, of course. So I'm going to return to the working notebook and I'm going to delete everything until, I would say, here, which is also a cool thing, is that you can select a lot of cells at the same time. For example, hitting the cell and then going to the cell where you want to go, hit shift, with shift click on this cell and then cut, and you cut everything from that cell, or you can go even to the edit and delete cells. That will do the same. I cut, it's just because I have here the shortcut, so I prefer to cut because I go to the shortcut immediately. But with shift you can select multiple cells just like you select continuous elements in other software here in Windows. You can also use Control to select multiple cells, as you do when you are trying to type, for example, when you're trying to select, for example, different files in a folder. Okay, these are just some tips or hacks for Jupyter Notebook. It's of course not really important for you to know this at the moment. Okay, let's do here conversions. So if we've dealt so far with atomic data types, you will probably be thinking, so if I have those data types, do I have to keep them with the same type forever? No. Luckily, we can convert elements back and forth using different functions that we'll learn. I'm going to approach the most important conversion functions that we can use. Of course, in other examples that we've dealt with other elements, those conversions will be studied there. For example, converting lists to sets or sets to dictionaries, which are objects that are a bit more advanced, but we'll get there, of course, with time. Now let's go for conversions between these atomic data types that we spoke of. I'm going to use this one conversions inside the tool folder, okay, so if you want to follow along, although I advise you to code along in these lectures, because in that way you'll pick up things a bit more faster, you have here the notebook that will follow. Okay, so let's start with the most common conversion thing that we can find off, or at least the situation where we need to convert stuff, which is, if I go here, a 1 inside quote. Can I ask you what's the type of variable that we have right here? What's this type of variable? Before checking the type, pause the video and see if you can name it. Okay, assuming you pause the video, let's go here, type, and put 1. We have a string, of course, not a number. And why is that? Because we have this enclosed in quotation marks. Okay, always remember that. When you see things enclosed in quotation marks, either they are arguments somewhere of functions or they are strings. They are not being treated as numbers, and Python will not recognize it as numbers. If I have a 1 right here, I would like to treat this as a number. Is there a way for me to pick this 1 in quotation marks and turn it into a number? There is. And we can do that with int. So if I pass this function int from integer, I'll turn this 1 into an integer type. I'll turn it into a number. If I do this, this element will now be treated as a number. And here, though I also see 1, this one can be passed inside other functions. So let me exemplify with the ABS function. This is really important, and let's go slow and understand what we are doing right here. So if I type ABS 1, right, 1 enclosed in quotes, I'll have an error, bad operand type for the ABS function. You've seen it. This is a string. Although I see a number, it's not a number, it's a string, it's a text element. And Python can really work around this text element and apply the mathematical function absolute on this text element. This is exactly the same as if I have type A, or ABS A, sorry. So ABS A would be also something impossible. There's no absolute value of a letter. So if Python doesn't know that this is a number inside, there must be some way for me to tell Python that this is a number. Now if I do the following, if I do ABS, but instead of passing that 1, pass int and put 1, this is the same element that you are seeing right here, 1, what will happen is that this is a composite function that we are doing. First, we are applying int to this element 1. And this int 1 in quotation marks will return 1 as a number. We can confirm that if I do here the following test. Type of this int 1 is an integer. It's no longer a string, although I'm seeing here a string, because this element is being passed through the int function that converts it to a number, and then the type evaluates the outcome of all this expression right here. Okay, so we have the inner expression, which is this function int that gets applied to this quotation mark 1, returns a 1, and then that 1 is evaluated by the type. Okay, I hope that this was clear. This is the same if I'm doing hint is passed. Of course, this is not syntax in Python, but it would be more or less the same. This is just some kind of type of pseudocode or something like that. So hint 1 basically retrieves this element, results in this element that is then evaluated by the type. And I can do the same with the ABS. If I pass, instead of applying the type function, I apply the ABS. I'm applying the absolute value to the 1, not to the quotation mark 1. Okay, so if I go here and run this, I'll have a good result and a 1. Because right now ABS is working with the returning element of this int function that converts elements to integers. And I can confirm that again. Type 1 string, type integer 1 integer. Okay, make sure you understand this and why this function is super cool. But there are other conversion functions that we may think of that are not only the int conversion. So this converts elements to integers. If I try to convert an A to an integer, let's see, there's an error. This is an invalid element to convert. We can't convert letters to integers. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? But there are elements that are texts, such as numbers that are interpreted as text, that are convertible to integers. We can convert those numbers, although they are being evaluated as text in Python, to integer values. I can do that. Although A, of course, it's not enabled. Okay, that is not, we can unfortunately do that, and that will yield an error when we try to pass something that can be a number inside the int function. You must be thinking, so if I can convert to int, probably I can also convert to float. Is that right? Yes, it is. If I pass float 1, notice that the returning element is a 1.0, because this element is now being interpreted as a float. I've passed the 1 inside the quotation marks to the float function, and the float function converts this element to something that it's a float, which is 1.0. I can pass that now to the type, let's see, and I have as a return float. I've converted this element. I think that with variables, everything that we are discussing right here will make a lot more sense when we can, for example, store these elements inside something. But we'll get there in the next lectures. Before we move on, these are of course basic conversions that we've done. We also have ways to convert. For example, one of the things that I can try to do, convert to an int 1.2. What will this yield? It rounds explicitly the 1.4 to 1. If I do 1.6, it converts also to 1. So this applies floor function immediately to this element. Be aware, if you do this conversion of floats to integers directly, you'll have mistakes. Probably you'll want to round this in some way before, because this may not be the behavior that you are expecting from this function. So we've covered int to convert something to integer, float to convert something to float. Next, we still have two atomic data types to cover, string and Boolean elements. That's what we are going to see in the next lecture. I'll see you there.